Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and it's time to continue with some addendum videos in this Asian horror playlist. Now, after the next installment, which will be part 7, we'll be ready to go back into the usual year in review and crack into 2019 Asian horror properly. I've finally seen enough movies from that year to make a proper assessment. Okay, so let's get started with the addendum here. I've got 8 mini-reviews for you tonight, with an emphasis on Hong Kong this time, and a few from a few other countries. Giving Hong Kong some love tonight. And as always, titles for all of the movies I discuss will be listed in the description box below. But it's always nice to begin a video reviewing a movie that is, as we say, an absolute dumpster fire. Oh yes, we're gonna swim through a river of dumpster juice, venture through those nasty snake farms, and make our way down to the local clown college to review The Deadly Camp, 1999 from Hong Kong. Oh, this is a doozy, folks. On a secluded island, 3 couples plan on camping out there. That night, they run into a group of 4 people led by Boar, who claims to be a salesman, but in actuality, he and his associates are smugglers. Boar's henchmen, Pervert and Blowy, yes, these are their names, wander off to urinate and accidentally pee on and set fire to a deformed boy they encounter. And these guys run off, and the boy returns home where he is tended to by his father, who is a murderer covered in bandages. Well, that sounds pretty stupid, right? And you may not know this, but The Deadly Camp is actually a remake of a movie called The Beasts from 1980. Years ago, I did a mini-review of The Beasts as part of this playlist, and it was a good flick. Deadly Camp is not. So this is another example where the remake pales in comparison to the original. Now, first of all, there is a lot of dull filler involving bland characters here. You know, they go to an island for a vacation. It seems to be like one of the most boring plots for movies nowadays, you know, or from the last handful of years. You know, they play games on the beach, get a few moments of terrible romance mixed in. There's a scene where a guy fakes jumping off a cliff to scare his girlfriend. And the whole construction of that scene, the way it's executed, is unbelievably stupid. It's basically a lesson in how not to make a movie, really. There are some dull patches of filler throughout this movie, even when danger is present, and there's a twist near the end that's pretty awful. Both the good guys and the bad guys are completely obnoxious. This is one of those, like, backwoods hillbilly movies, only this time in Hong Kong, which I almost uniformly hate. I mean, yes, we have, like, some good examples, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The original is really good, but those are just an exception that proves the rule that, yeah, I don't like these movies very much. So I have a problem with the premise alone. Now, the acting at Deadly Camp is completely pathetic, regardless of my, feelings of this subgenre of horror film. You have 2 characters here. These henchmen, not even henchmen, they're buddies of Anthony Wong. Yeah, and he's in this too, by the way. And every time they talk to each other, it feels like a really bad stand-up comedy routine. And the comedy's not even close to being funny. And Anthony Wong does show up in like a small supporting role, but there's no point to his presence because his big scene is kind of disappointing. The horror scenes themselves are not worth the wait. The opening scene is lame. 2 people are running in the forest and some dude kills them with a chainsaw. Cheaply shot, completely without any type of craftsmanship whatsoever. The gore in this movie, which you would expect to be there, is practically non-existent. And these are the problems that we see throughout the film. What little practical effects that we do get are really bad, too. Like, really bad. If you want good death scenes, you need to stay away from this. This does not deliver. Some of the music choices are terrible as well. This movie does everything that you're not supposed to do in a slasher film, so I do not recommend this. Now, unbelievably, this did get a pretty tricked out Blu-ray box set release, which was part of the Made in Hong Kong Volume 1 box set from Vinegar Syndrome. All right, and we already covered a different film in that box set called Erotic Nightmare in the last video, and that movie stunk pretty much as well. So We'll cover the last film in the next part in this playlist, and hopefully it'll actually be pretty good. But in this case, just do not even bother watching Deadly Camp. Save yourself the pain. Alright, now we go from Deadly Camp to a film that's way better. Way better, folks. And I am talking about, of course, The Imp from 1981, also from Hong Kong. With a pregnant wife at home, Kung has been struggling to find a job, but he finally finds work as a security guard in a commercial building. Strange incidents occur in the building, and his colleagues begin to die one by one in horrible ways due to an imp, a mythological being similar to a fairy or demon, frequently described in folklore and superstition. A geomancer warns Kung that he will be the next victim and teaches him how to avoid his fate. Now, this movie has a pretty realistic, dramatic core to it. Our protagonist has everyday problems, like attempting to support a pregnant wife by looking for a reliable job. There are financial pressures, for sure, and his wife does have kind of an attitude problem as well, which only adds to the pressure, but he's doing his best to provide. Now, Charlie Chin stars in the lead role. Most people will recognize him from the Lucky Stars trilogy, and Kent Chang has a supporting role. We've been getting some legit Blu-ray releases of some of his best films, like Run and Kill recently, so this has a good cast. There are a lot of superstitious content in this. It revolves around Feng Shui, and ironically, I just recently reviewed a movie on this channel that had a Feng Shui angle, and that was Exuma from South Korea, which was a much more recent film. The Imp also has this element because this advisor who shows up near the midpoint directs our protagonist away from danger using Feng Shui as kind of like a foundation. There's some pretty interesting dialogue and kind of superstitions that arise from this. There are a few spellcasting scenes, and the geomancer attempts to destroy the imp. The spirit attacks are well filmed. You don't actually see the entity that much until the end, but they do a really good job in this film creating an ominous presence. Like, this film takes itself seriously, and it does pull it off. It pulls off that tone. And this evil entity is vicious. It uses, like, invisibility attacks, suffocation tactics, other abilities that make escape, like, impossible for its target. It's a pretty efficient killer. It uses fog to kind of disorient its victims. There's a surgery scene early on that's pretty creepy, and the scene with the car is nuts. Truly a good quality execution of horror here. And the finale is lengthy, and the ending gets pretty crazy. So, if you add on top of this a lot of atmosphere, which is really accentuated near the end with vivid colors like green and red, this is a easy recommendation for you. Easy recommendation. If you have not seen The Imp, I definitely recommend this one. It's available streaming on YouTube and Daily Motion. Would be really nice to get a Blu-ray release of this one. This would be a really cool release. But we can only hope for now. Alright, so we recovered on that one. And this next film here is a pretty good flick. And it's also from Hong Kong again. Like I said, we're going on a Hong Kong streak here, folks. And that is Mortuary Blues from 1990. And this is more of a horror comedy. On a remote island off of Hong Kong, its rich and happy inhabitants are celebrating an annual ritual by staging an operatic show. The island is not productive, but its people are rich. No wonder Police Chief Yuan Kuei becomes suspicious. He thinks he's sitting on top of a narcotics ring. His 2 men are ordered to watch the movement of the opera people. Little does the chief know that the islanders are living off the loot their ancestors made. And they buried much of this treasure and a dormant vampire under a pagoda. But the rays of the moon bring a coven of female zombies back to life, so a special police squad is assigned to stop them. Kind of a nutty premise, right? But there is quite a bit of humor in this one, as well as time spent with our goofy performance troupe protagonists. Now, the comedy is kind of wacky slapstick, it is, but in this case, I do think it works pretty well when compared to some other Hong Kong movies that use comedy. A few scenes may be considered dumb, like the Peking opera actress who needs to poop during her performance. But the actors do a good job, and they make things kind of amusing. They're energetic without being too annoying, which is important for stuff like this. And by the way, Corey Yun has a supporting role, the director-actor. Now, I do think the story meanders a little bit during the opening act, and that is the weakest part of the film. But if you're just a little bit patient, the movie plot line kind of hits its stride near the 30-minute mark, and things improve significantly after that. Mortuary Blues focuses on big set pieces. So, sometimes when I review a movie on here, it's just a pretty good movie. You don't remember a lot of specific scenes, though, within the movie. This is the opposite of that. This movie is memorable despite being a little bit uneven. And that's because of the big set pieces that are, unforgettable, really, I think, whether you like them or not. Now, there's a lengthy chase scene involving these ghouls that awaken, and they run around in circles, attacking our protagonists in this, pit area. And it's quite funny because the specific tactics used to temporarily freeze these monsters are amusing. There's a big tomb underwater sequence that's also pretty good. Our protagonists explore an old tomb with deadly traps, almost Indiana Jones style. I think that was probably the influence. And then they need to swim through an underwater area for a few minutes. There's this, I don't know what you would call him, a man in chains who just sits underwater and appears to be sleeping. And I thought it was a pretty cool thing. Some pretty creative stuff here. And then you get a finale against the main bad guy in another pretty lengthy set piece. Takes place on a stage, like a stage play stage area. And there's many different tactics that our protagonists use. You get some flying cloth, swords, gold rings, gold coins, ropes. They're doing everything they can to take down this bad guy. Pretty creative stuff and satisfying way to end the movie. So, and all of these scenes do have an element of humor to them, so it never gets really scary or anything, but pretty good stuff here. There are also some nicely lit scenes here and there that are pretty atmospheric. Now, the makeup effects in this one do look pretty cheap. They're not very good, but the set designs were effective enough. So I recommend Mortuary Blues. It's a good flick, if you like horror comedies. Now, this is available on Blu-ray, and I think you could get that from Hong Kong, either Yes Asia or DDD House. All right, our next one here, we're staying in Hong Kong, folks, and this one is called Bless This House from 1988, and it's another horror comedy. Building designer Bill Chang, played by Bill Tung, and his family move into a seemingly wonderful house after getting a promotion. However, they are not aware of the house's sinister past involving its previous owner, an abusive, handicapped actor who torched his home, killing him, his wife, and 2 daughters. After the Chang family settled in, the actor's restless ghost wants to reclaim ownership of the house and the people who inhabit it. Now, most interestingly, this was directed by Ronnie Yu. Yes, he's most well known for The Bride with White Hair, Fearless, and Freddy vs. Jason. So this is the same director, most interestingly. He's made some good stuff over the years, so I went into Bless This House with some excitement. Now, I will say, not quite as entertaining as I was expecting, but it's still pretty good. Now, this has a pretty basic setup, with the family moving their stuff into the house, but the characters are likable enough. The comedy in this film is okay. It's okay. You get some smile-worthy stuff, but it's not like laugh out loud, so to speak. It's fine. This is actually far more laid back than most Hong Kong horror movies from this era. Much of Bless This House involves interaction between the human characters. You don't really see the evil spirits that much, but they do show up more during the second half and the final confrontation. The horror elements start ramping up near the 30-minute mark. Basic haunted house stuff. You get poltergeist-like activity, some bursts of indoor wind, a quick shot of a spirit in the background, some voices at night, a few physical attacks, etc. Some scenes try to be creepy, while others try to be humorous. It does get violent at times, and there are some odd tactics used by the good guys. So it's kind of a mix here of different tones wielded in here. The makeup effects are actually pretty effective in this. Now, there are a few memorable moments in this, like there's a fight involving a Taoist priest that's pretty good, and the finale is satisfying enough, but I still think this movie is perhaps lacking in some of like the big highlight sequences that are memorable. You know, this is a lot of like pretty good scenes stacked on top of one another. So it's like the opposite of Mortuary Blues. I think this movie is probably a little bit more consistent in overall quality, but there's not as many like big time moments that you're always going to remember. Only 83 minutes long though. This is recommendable, but nothing spectacular. Alright, now Bless This House has the same availability as Mortuary Blues. It's available on Region A Blu-ray from Hong Kong, probably from Yes Asia or DDD House. And of course, those all have subtitles. Alright, we're going to keep rolling with Hong Kong here. Alright, it's another film from the same era. Maybe, well, it's actually a decade later. This is a decade later. So this does have a different vibe to it. And that is Last Ghost Standing from 1999, but it's another horror comedy. On New Year's Eve 2000, the cinema on the 666 Kings Road presents its last show before closure. We follow a projectionist and his girlfriend as they navigate his final work shift. Unfortunately, the forces of hell arise and are very unsatisfied with the modern movie quality. A horrible, gory bloodbath begins, including a soccer match with a decapitated head, a nasty feces monster, and several other forms of nastiness. Will anyone survive? So this begins with a brief narration describing the end of the world, because it's 1999 after all, right? And all those predictions never came true. But there's not much of a story or character development in this film, even though it gives you that setup. They don't really go that deep into like Millennium Doomsday type stuff. It's also kind of lacking in craftsmanship in some areas. Now, I've never been a big fan of Simon Liu as an actor. He usually annoys me, but he's actually watchable in this film. I thought he was fine here. Now, one of the aspects that I really enjoyed about Last Ghost Standing is that some scenes are delightfully stupid, and they do it on purpose. Last Ghost Standing is pure schlock on purpose, but it's fun to watch because of the interaction with these ghosts, and it's constant and incredibly weird. So, for example, there's a deformed monster that emerges from toilet bowls at one point, and that entire sequence is utterly ridiculous. The human characters who fight this thing are also nutcases who are on drugs, so you can only imagine the shenanigans that occur during that scene. On paper, the scene like that, it shouldn't work. But in this movie, I think it does. There's red demon ghosts that show up, pretty cheesy and cool at the same time. There's a fun scene involving a flying decapitated head, as well as another attack that must have been inspired from the Evil Dead movies, and I'll let you appreciate that one for yourself. But I enjoyed these horror sequences, The special effects are practical for the most part, and that adds a lot of charm to it, despite the fact that they're inconsistent in quality. There's some good stuff and some bad stuff. I'm actually talking about a lot of special effects tonight, aren't I? And that's what you get from this era, right? The 80s and 90s, where they relied more on practical effects instead of, the CGI stuff. There are a few effective corpse shots and a good amount of blood in this, which is nice to have in a ghost flick. Movie theater setting is a plus, and Francis Ng has a cameo. Only 85 minutes long. I like this one. I think this movie's pretty neat and quite fun. Yes, it's kind of dumb. It is kind of dumb, but there's something about the practical effects and the way they use the horror scenes. I liked it. I enjoyed this one. And availability, again, Region A Blu-ray from Hong Kong, from Yes Asia or DDD House. Alright, so that's our run with Hong Kong movies here tonight. Now we're going to mix in a few other ones. Our next one comes from Japan, and it's a very different movie, alright? And that film is called Suicide Dolls from 1999, an exploitation horror flick. A woman shoots herself. A woman hangs herself. A woman commits harakiri. Were they the victims of suicide dolls, or were they themselves the dolls? Ooh, okay, so from that little synopsis, perhaps this is one of those fancy schmancy exploitation flicks that offers some mind-warping philosophy and thought-provoking observations, regardless of whether or not it actually makes sense. Well, if you were thinking that, I have some bad news for you. The plot synopsis is just pretentious. So this was directed by a man named Tamakichi Anaru, the creator of Tumbling Doll of Flesh and Women's Flesh, My Red Guts. The latter of which I covered in the last video of this playlist. So, you gotta hand it to this guy for coming up with some pretty fantastic names for his movies. Unfortunately, his movies are never really that good. Suicide Dolls is similar in budget and style to the aforementioned films, with a direct-to-video quality that has the feel of a snuff film. And that is a bit of an advantage for the film. You know, on the positive side, the physical special effects look realistic to a degree, with the final death being sufficiently disgusting and bloody, and I think that direct-to-video quality helps to sell it. Unfortunately, this is pretty boring to watch. You know, the first segment consists of a woman just sitting in her apartment unpacking boxes, then she shoots herself. That's literally everything that happens during that 20-minute segment. Then the next two segments follow the same pattern. There's practically no story. A lot of dull filler to pad the runtime in between the gory set pieces. Only about 1 hour in length, but I still thought this was difficult to sit through until the ending. The last 5 minutes of this movie is a short film involving actual dolls. And it's easily the best part of the movie. It's demented and creepy, and I wish the entire film was like that, actually. But kind of interesting. They really could have subverted expectations to make a film entirely with dolls, you know, but unfortunately we got what we got. This director, I just don't think he's especially good from the stuff I've seen from him. If you want to watch something like this from the same era, I'd rather watch one of Daisuke Yamanouchi's flicks. He directed Muzan-E, also known as Celluloid Nightmares, as well as the Red Room flicks. So I would say watch those instead of this guy's stuff. So no, I do not recommend this. The availability is that it is on DVD. I believe Region 1 DVD. Alright, our final two titles this evening are reassessments. They're repeat viewings. And I covered both of these movies previously in this playlist, but I'm revising my assessment of them because I enjoyed them more the second time around. So we're going to take another look at a few films here. I also have a few full-length reviews in separate videos on my channel. So if you search for the titles of these, you'll find those if you want more information. First one is called Satan's Slave from 1980 from Indonesia. So after the death of his wife, a businessman and his two children are plagued by visions of ghosts and demons, and soon people around them start to die, which all started after the arrival of their new and mysterious housekeeper. Now, if you remember, this got a recent remake that I was quite impressed with, and I also have a review of the remake on my channel, so you can see what I feel about both films if you like. Now, my previous opinion on this movie was not positive. I thought it had too much dull filler, and a few scenes seemed a bit goofy, but I've changed my mind. Okay, this has quite a bit of atmosphere, and the horror elements are strong. The recent Blu-ray transfer definitely helps. I mean, I'm sure the transfer I saw previously was just garbage, so that may have affected my enjoyment of, I guess, the visuals and atmosphere of the film. Yeah, it's greatly superior to the old crappy DVD transfer, so if you're going to watch this, watch it on Blu-ray, I think. One of my favorite ghost scenes in this one is where the daughter is haunted. I liked how the ghost at times would walk through walls during that scene, and I think it's a highlight. Some of the ghouls are freaky looking due to their monster design. So, music and scoring very ominous in this, which supplements the spookiness. Now, the character interaction, I think, is good, if only because we have differing personalities at play. The characters just seem a bit different from one another, which always helps. But the pacing is pretty slow, and there are patches of less eventful stuff here. I can understand why I reacted negatively the first time I saw the film years ago, so you may need some patience going into this, so I'll just tell you that. But I do think the atmosphere really drives this to recommendable status, as well as a few of the horror set pieces. Alright, so I recommend this one now. The availability of this, it's on Blu-ray, and I think it received an American Blu-ray release. Alright, our final film of the night. And it's a memorable one, whether you like it or not. And that is Kichiku Dai Enkai, also known as Banquet of the Beasts, 1997, a Japanese exploitation horror. Loosely inspired by a notorious historical incident, a small group of radical student revolutionaries are holed up in a woodland cabin. While the leader is in jail, his leftist group is controlled by his girlfriend, but her leadership lacks conviction and perspective. When the leader commits suicide in prison, despair and confusion rule the group. Revenge and violence erupts in graphic ways. Now, first and foremost, this movie can certainly hold its own against just about any Japanese horror movie in terms of disgusting violence and gore. And I mentioned this in my full-length review of this film, which I think I reviewed last year. Much of the second half of this film has some of the most graphic, stomach-churning death scenes ever committed to Japanese film. I'm not overstating things. So you need to have a strong stomach to watch this. If you're into gore movies, though, this is right up your alley. From a filmmaking perspective, it is unnerving to watch, and the physical effects are great for a movie with this level of budget. Kazuyoshi Komakiri is the director, and he would go on to make a number of quality non-horror movies. So unlike Tamakichi Anaru, Komakiri has far more talent and does a very good job at creating a level of craftsmanship to the film. Okay? My biggest problem with this film is that the opening half is lacking in horror, visceral horror, and it's not especially interesting. I did discuss a few themes in my full-length review, which you could watch, but at the end of the day, the story does not have a whole lot of tension, suspense, or interest, and that really kind of hurts the opening half of it. I think they could have crafted it a little bit better to become, a little bit more tension-filled before the violence hits. Nevertheless, this is a memorable experience, mostly recommendable to those who want nasty gore, but if you want a little bit of a political commentary infused, that might add some brownie points for you. So yeah, I recommend this film to a certain type of viewer, okay, and you should know who you are. This is available on DVD. I think it was an American release on that one. So yeah, that concludes my Asian Horror Addendum video, Part 6. Now the priorities in this video, I would say, are probably The Imp and Satan's Slave in terms of overall filmmaking quality and just good quality horror films, right? With moderate importance to Last Ghost Standing for fun schlock and Kichiku Dai Enkai for nasty gore. So we got a little bit of a variety here. There should be something for someone, I think. So be sure to join me in my next installment, because I'm going to review some additional titles that I missed the first time around. And then after that one, we'll be cracking into 2019 hard. So get ready, folks. And as always, I'll see you next time.